Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason Del Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We have reached Week 13 of the 2021 season, also known as Week 2 of the playoffs. We still have more than a handful of teams advanced to the second round, to the area round. We had 8 teams advance to the playoffs, and 5 of them are still alive and kicking. And so we will talk about all the action from last week and preview the 5 games that we have on the schedule this week. Again, we have some Thursday action and some Friday action, so people will have a chance to check out games on both nights, although some of these games you'll have to be making quite a drive, and we will talk about all that as we look ahead to the area round of the playoffs. And as we enter the playoffs, much like we do during the regular season when teams are on byes, we will talk about what they did last week, even though they don't have a game this week. And so we will talk about the teams that also were eliminated from the playoffs in the first round last week. And we will work our way down from top to bottom. That will not change. And that means that we will lead off with the Denison Yellow Jackets, who were knocked out of the playoffs in their 5A Division II Region 2 by-district game against Ennis, 47-25. A disappointing end for a extremely large senior class, many of whom are 3-year, let alone multiple-year starters, and you even have a 4-year starter in there as well. This was a game that was basically all about big plays, and Ennis was able to come up. It seemed like every time they scored, it was a big play, whereas Denison had to work a little harder, put together actual drives instead of hitting on those big plays. Despite that, this was a game that late in the third quarter was down to a one-possession game. It was an 8-point margin, 26-18. But unfortunately, Denison was unable to get the equalizer / keep the game close over the final 12-plus minutes, and Ennis pulled away for the victory. So in the game, as you would expect, Jadarian Price had a big game to finish off a great career. 31 carries, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns rushing. He also caught 6 passes for 50 yards. Logan Voigt kicked a field goal, and Jack Allman had a touchdown run as well in the fourth quarter. This was a game where, like I said, so you have these big plays on one side. The big play for Denison was Price's 47-yard run with 16 seconds left in the third quarter. Caleb Hevner throws to Jaron Hendricks in the back of the end zone for the 2-point conversion to make it that 26-18 margin. And then the first play of the ensuing Ennis possession ends up being an 89-yard touchdown throw from Jackson Gilkey to T.T. Cox. And it was not a bomb or anything like that. It was a little short 5-yard pass, and Cox made a move and was able to get the sideline and was gone. And if you look at most of the touchdowns by Ennis, you have a 66-yard punt return, so obviously that's a big play on special teams. You have the 89-yard pass from Cox. D. Johnson opened up the second half with an 80-yard touchdown run less than a minute into the third quarter. And then Cox in the middle of the fourth quarter had a 67-yard touchdown run. So that's four of their touchdowns were really big plays. And they came at obviously key times, none bigger than the Cox one. It seemed like Denison had all the momentum. They were down 19-3 at half, and then they were down 26 to 3 after that touchdown by Johnson, and then Price ends up scoring on back-to-back possessions in the middle of the third, and then with the 16 seconds left, and you're like, okay, game on, here we go. But they were just unable to stop the Lions. Now, obviously, and this is really good. They ended the regular season, in the top 5 in the state, and they were undefeated. They were playing at home. That's the joys of winning or being a top 2 seed, and they were the district 5A Division II champs. So it's tough. It's tough from that aspect. It's also tough to see the other three teams in the district, Lovejoy, Frisco, and Liberty, all win rather easily in their first games. I think the closest game was a 20-point margin, and so that shows the difference between Liberty end up getting that third seed. If Denison would have won that game, which they lost by 5 points, that could have been the difference between advancing to the second round or having to play the District 8 champion Ennis. So Denison finishes the season at 7-4. That's the second straight year that they do that, losing in the first round. So the program's still searching for its first win in the playoffs since 2009 when it made the state semifinals. And so I think when you look back at the season, I think it's a frustrating one. There were moments where this team showed that it could be really good, and I think it was. They don't do rankings beyond the top 10. They don't do rankings once the playoffs start. But you have a Denison team who lost to, at the time that they played them, three ranked teams. Liberty was the only team that was not ranked, and at this point in the season, all four of them advanced. So there's a really good chance that all four of them are still the final four teams left in the region. So you can't help that schedule. You're in a district with the three teams that beat you, and they combined went 9-1, 9-1, 9-1, and they all lost to each other. So somebody was going to get those losses, but they're 27-3, and now you've lost to an Ennis team that has finished the regular season undefeated and is 11-0. So I think the program is still in that point where, and Coach Whitson brought this up. I think before the Liberty game, after the Frisco game, before the Liberty game. When is this program going to be able to beat people that you don't expect them to beat, or that it's a 50-50 matchup and they come out in that key game that changes the seeding or flips the standings, that sort of thing. The one thing that Denison has shown is they don't lose to people that they're not supposed to, and that is a big thing, because a lot of people have trouble when you look at the scores on Friday nights. There's a lot of, how did that team lose to that team? There's a lot of that in the first round of this playoffs. How did that first place team lose to that fourth place team? How did that second place team lose to that third place team? We have, and we'll talk about them. Some of these teams that are still alive, they were a third seed and beat a 2 seed. And it happens every year, and it just so happens that Denison's schedule was really tough. And if you talk to the people that do the rankings and put out these polls and that sort of thing, I think even though Denison is ends at 7-4 and has the losses that they do, I still think they're a top 15, definitely a top 20 team in the state. It just so happened that literally there's a chance, if all four of these teams advance to the region semifinals, that you played 4 of the top 16 teams in the state. And I don't know you can't change that. You're in a district with 3 of them, and you got matched up with one in the playoffs at the start. So it's very I know it can be very frustrating. I know it was frustrating last year that they weren't able to, that they had a close first round game that they weren't able to pull out, and so I know the seniors are disappointed that they weren't able to at least get a playoff win. And I think if they would, the winner of this game, I think, was going to have a chance to advance past the second round. Now after that, you would have had a rematch with Lovejoy. Obviously the final score the first time against them was not close. I think obviously some of that came against backups, so you never know. But I think if in all fairness, if you would have said to Denison, hey, if you get to the second round, no matter what part of the bracket, and you have to face Lovejoy again or Frisco again, but you get to the third round, I think that and that ends the run. I think obviously that would have been a great success considering the playoff struggles that have happened in the last decade plus. But still, it's another really good season. We'll see what realignment does with them. It's really messy right now, I think, especially with the Frisco schools and what's going to happen with them. When you look at their district, Rock Hill is going to be leaving. They're actually going to be going all the way up to 6A. There was some talk that Princeton might leave. They turned in a number in the high 1800s. That's probably going to leave them a little bit short, so we don't know what's going to happen there. There's a chance that Lake Dallas moves down to 4A Division I. And I will bring this up. This is something to tuck away here in the next couple weeks. There is a chance, and I'd say it's a 5% chance, maybe a 10% chance at most. There is a chance, however slight it may be, that Denison does move down to 4A. And I didn't think initially that it was possible, but I looked at the numbers. Somebody brought it to my attention and said, hey, well, what happens if this happens? And I said, well, yes, and that would make that happen. And here's the reasoning. So the number this last time for 5A was 1150. Or two realignments ago, it was 1150. And if it goes up this time from the last realignment, it went up 80 to 12. I'm messing up my numbers here. I'm gonna pull it up because I want to make sure I'm getting it right, because the math is actually pretty simple, but I wanna get the numbers exactly right. And I should have pulled it up before I started talking, but I will pull it up while we do this. So the number for 4A, okay, yes. So the number went from 1150 2 years ago to 1230. So you had to have 1230 and up to be in 5A. If you're 1229 and under, you're at 4A. So the number went up 80. It went from 1150 to 1230. Now I'm on track. If the number goes up again by 80, that means that the number would be 1310. Now, you have a situation where the number is not exactly guaranteed to go to whatever the previous number was. Just because it went up 80 doesn't mean it's going to. But usually there's a pattern. If it goes up 5, it usually goes up 5 to 10, some of the smaller classifications. But it went up 80. So if you go up 80 from the 1230, you get to 1310. Well, Denison turned in 1327 as its number, which means it would be under 20 students away from that number. So what happens hypothetically if the cutoff becomes 1330? What if the number goes up 100? Denison would miss it by 3, and they would drop down to 4A. So I don't think it's likely. I think moving up 80 or 50 is probably a better guess. We don't know until it actually happens. But depending on how things shake out, if there is it's gonna be relatively close. I think there's a chance that Denison is within 30 to 50 kids of what the cutoff is going to be to drop down to 4A next time. And that's going to be something definitely to watch in 2024, much like we're watching Sherman as they continue to grow, and they could potentially be 6A next time. I think they probably are going to be, and if they stay at their current growth rate from the last realignment, they're probably going to be 6A. But if Denison stays around where they are and the number goes up again, there's almost a guarantee that Denison would drop down into 4A. So that's just something to watch as we get the numbers here in the next couple weeks for the cutoffs. So we'll know for sure if that's going to happen. But if not, I think you would see a lot of the same people together. Argyle moving up could be interesting. Melissa is in that zone a little below Denison, that depending on where the cutoff is, they might actually stay 4A. Argyle's bigger than Denison, so that would be, if Denison stays in 5A, then Argyle's definitely going 5A. But there's some mixing and matching. I don't really know what direction they could put Denison. They could put them in a couple different directions, so that'll be interesting to see as well. And of course, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the senior class at Denison. They've been so outstanding for, like I said, you have a lot of these guys on defense that are 3-year starters. Ja'Kalen Fields, Landry Massenberg, Jalik Lewis. just so many guys. Will Wallace at linebacker. I mean, there's just so many guys that have been major contributors, since the start of their sophomore year. And then, of course, on offense, you have guys, we've talked about all the skill position guys. Keegan Pruitt and Trey Rhodes at the receiver spots are 3-year guys. Damian Smallwood on the line moved around. Was an H-back. Saw some time on defense, but slotted in on the offensive line. And then in the backfield, you have two of the most productive players in school history. With Caleb Havener at quarterback, he graduates with the most completions in school history, the most passing yards in school history, over 4,000. Threw for 37 touchdown passes. That's second all time. And then of course Jadarian Price. Starting from day one as a freshman, 4 years, went over 5,000 yards in this last game to finish with 5,095, to finish third all time behind DJ Jones and Corey Robertson. Finished with 59 total touchdowns. 53 of those were rushing. Showed his versatility. He's also tied for sixth most receptions in school history. Just obviously despite being a running back, he had 64 catches in his career. And that's a career that also, that sophomore year he missed a handful of games because of an ankle injury. So those numbers could be, there's 3 or 4 games in there where he's missing those stats that to add to those totals. And I hate to say too, one of the bugaboos this year, and it happened in this game against Ennis. He had a touchdown catch called back on the very last play of the game. Ennis did not let it stand and let the game end. They made Denison run another play when they could have just ended the game right there and it wouldn't have mattered. It would have made the final 47-31. Like, that makes a difference. You don't have a playoff committee to impress or anything like that. But Denison had 13 touchdowns called back because of penalty this year, and at least half of them were his. So just an outstanding career. He's going to sign with Notre Dame, enroll early, and get up to South Bend, and I don't think anybody would be no one's going to be surprised if he ends up I don't know if you could walk right in and start right there, but he's going to be a factor, I think, his freshman year, whether it's in the backfield or in the slot. I think he could be a really good slot receiver, and of course we've seen what he can do on special teams, returning kicks. So I think he's going to find a way to get it on the field early, up there. So tip of the hat to him. Finished this season, he has his best season, over almost 1,800 yards rushing. And it says a lot about a kid that he started his career with over 1,400 yards rushing, almost got to 1,800 this year, and it just a fantastic run for him in his time at Denison. And Denison is a running back school. It always has been. You don't know when you're going to get another one of these. It was almost 2009 with DJ Jones was obviously the last great one. He's the all-time leading rusher in school history for what he did in his 3 years that ended in 2009, and it's been since then that a play like this has come along. And Coach Whitson said it. He said, we don't know when the next one is going to come along. It could be 10 years. It could be 3 years. Nobody knows. But you just have to appreciate and enjoy, what you were able to see from a player like that. And at some point, someone's going to come along, because it seems like at Denison there always is. And I've been, very privileged since I got here. The top 3 rushers in school history have been, under my watch as a reporter for this paper. I started in Corey Robertson's the tail end of his junior year, so I got to see 3 games there, and then his full senior season, and then I saw the 3 years of DJ Jones, and of course 4 years of Jadarian Price, and a lot of people can go a lot of years without covering. You're lucky if you get to see one really good player like that, and I've gotten to see the 3 best ones, and see every at least for the 2 of them, every snap that they took in their careers. and to see that is a really cool thing. So unfortunately, Denison's run is over, but we do have some teams that are still alive, and we move down to Class 4A Division II Region 1, and that is where we find Van Alstyne, who won their bi-district matchup 23-16 over Iowa Park. So they have advanced to the area round, and they will take on Monahans. These are two teams. Both teams are 8-3. Monahans advanced with a 31-28 victory against the Lubbock Estacado. This is a 7:00 game on Friday, and it is a game that will be in Abilene at wonderful Shotwell Stadium, a place that I have some familiarity with when Denison was out in Region 1, and unfortunately being in Region 1 means that you have to face some people from West Texas, and there's not a real good meeting point, and we'll find out another one of those here in a second. So Van Alstyne has to make a long trip to Abilene to face Monahans. I think they'll take it. Obviously, last year, losing in the first round against Graham, this is the second time in 3 years that they've won a playoff game, and they'll be trying to get to the third round next week for the first time since 2011. So it's been a decade since that's happened. The winner of this game plays the winner of the Aubrey-Sweetwater game, and obviously that would be a district rematch for Van Alstyne after losing to Aubrey. That was the game, as you remember, decided second and third place. Aubrey got the 2 seed, and Van Alstyne got the 3 seed. And in getting to the second round, Van Alstyne was down. They were down 9-0, middle of the second quarter, and they were able to pull off a comeback. They got a couple of touchdown passes. They got 3 touchdown passes from Gavin Montgomery. The first was to Gavin Bybee, and that got Van Alstyne within 9-7 at halftime, so that was good. And then Diego Hernandez kicked a 38-yard field goal in the third quarter to give Van Alstyne the lead, middle of the third. And then late in the third, Dakota Howard had the first of his 2 touchdown catches. He had his second early in the fourth quarter, and that put Van Alstyne up 23-9. And then on the ensuing drive, Iowa Park scored to get within 23-16, but Van Alstyne kept them off the board the rest of the way and was able to get the win. Montgomery threw for just 132 yards, but there were a couple of big ones in there. Both of Howard had just the 2 catches, but they both went for touchdowns for the 82 yards. And Jaden Mahan led on the ground. He had 16 carries for 73 yards. He also had an interception on defense and blocked a punt that led to the field goal. So an all-around, it was a gritty, kind of grindy effort. For both sides. Really didn't do a whole lot in terms of putting up offense in this game. Both sides had turnovers to deal with. Both teams had to settle for field goals. And Iowa Park obviously got out of the gates a little bit faster, but they weren't able to do a whole heck of a lot after that, especially in the second half. And Van Alstyne was able to grind their way to a victory. And we'll see what they can do against Monahans. Monahans hasn't been in the second round since 2016, so they don't have a group of guys who have experienced any sort of playoff success. So this is a big deal for them. And I think this could be a pretty even matchup. I think we talked last week. I thought, Van Alstyne, Iowa Park was a very even matchup, and I didn't really know what way it was going to go. Obviously, it was only a one-score game here. So I think we could see a little bit of that this week as well. I do think Van Alstyne is obviously in the better district. Van Alstyne, Aubrey, and Salina all advanced. Sanger did end up losing to Graham, which I think probably everybody would have probably expected. So it's going to be interesting to see. And obviously, Monahans won a close game. So I think this is a pretty even matchup. I guess the only question might be who handles the travel better. Obviously, it's a much longer bus ride. For both sides. Maybe Monahans deals with it a little bit better because of their location. They don't have the short bus rides that Van Alstyne does. both in non-district and in their district. So that might be a factor early, and it may just be Van Alstyne weathering the storm like they did last week. You fall behind, you figure it out, and then you go from there. So going to be interesting to see what happens. And again, that's 7 p.m. on Friday at Shotwell Stadium in Abilene. If you're making the trip, please be safe. That's a long road to go down to watch that game, and if you're coming back that night, obviously it's going to be really late at night. So be careful on that as well. And if you're going to our next game, you're going to be traveling a whole lot further, and you're going to get back a whole lot later because the next game on the schedule in the area round is in 3A Division I Region 1, and that is between Whitesboro and Bushland. Whitesboro advanced with a 56-14 win against Breckenridge, and Bushland won 55-6 against Slayton. Whitesboro is 7-4, Bushland is 8-3, and this game will be at 7 p.m. on Friday, and it is in Childress. And for those of you who are not familiar with Childress, because why would you be? That you have a reason not to know where it is. For map purposes, Childress is about, I would say an hour-ish northeast of Lubbock. So this is going to be a really long drive for Whitesboro. It's not as long for Bushland, obviously, but Bushland is out there, up near the Panhandle. That's why, unfortunately, this game is where it is. Last time they played this game, I believe it was in Vernon. This is a rematch from 2 years ago, in 2019, and Bushland ended up winning that one. I'm going to pull up the score here as I go away from my Google Maps. Bushland won that one 34-10 in the second round. So you have some guys who were a part of that game. Some of these seniors were in that game. And unfortunately, this game, like I said, it's in Childress. It's much more advantageous for Bushland. But they still have to drive. They're driving 2 hours, and Whitesboro's probably driving 3.5 hours. So there's not a lot in between. Like I said, I think they played at Vernon last time, so maybe since that was a little bit closer, or maybe Vernon's being used. I'm not sure this time of year. There's a lot of stadiums you have to get on the list, but so unfortunately, it's going to be a long road trip for Bearcat fans, and it might be worth it. Of course, because Whitesboro's on a roll. We've talked about it the last couple weeks. They had those key games that they had to win, not just to get in the playoffs, but also to get a better seed. And they were a 3 seed that beat a 2 seed. Breckenridge was the 2nd seed, and they proved that they were much better. And it also shows about the playoffs. You never know, because Pilot Point was the 2 seed in Whitesboro's district after losing to Brock. And they lost to the 3 seed from Breckenridge's district. So you just never know. But Whitesboro's been on a roll, and they've been doing it with their passing game. We talked about how they tore up Peaster in that finale to get the 3rd seed in a big way through the air, and that did not change this week. Mac Harper went 14 of 20 for 324 yards and 4 touchdowns. And again, it was spread around. The crazy thing, of course, we mentioned last week that Jace Sanders had the big game, with almost 200 yards receiving. In this game, he had 1 catch for 2 yards. But you have 3 other guys who had 100 yards receiving, led by Jake Hermes, who had 6 catches for 137 yards and 3 touchdowns. Torrin Nagelstad had 5 catches for 133 yards and a touchdown. And Sean Shares had 4 catches for 100 yards. He also had a touchdown. That one was from Clay Hermes in the fourth quarter. Hermes went 4 for 4, passing for 80 yards. So combined, they were 18 of 24 for 404 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Harper added a touchdown run. Jay Sanders did have a touchdown run. And Sean Shares also had a touchdown run. So it was actually a crazy first quarter. Whitesboro got up 22-0, and then Breckenridge had a kick return for a touchdown after the last one, and then they scored later in the quarter. So it was 22-14 after the first quarter. You're thinking, oh, this could be a shootout, but Breckenridge never scored again. So and Whitesboro scored. They continue to score. Put up big numbers again for the second straight week. Probably going to have to do that again. If they do, they will make the third round of the playoffs for the third time in school history, the first time since 2017. The winner of this game is going to play either shallow water or early. Unfortunately, if it's shallow water, we could be looking at another long drive. But again, at this point, when you're in Region 1, you got to get lucky to have a close game. And I don't know if Whitesboro is going to be any luckier than their first round game, depending on how things shake out the rest of the way. Bushland has made the region semis three of the last 4 seasons before this one, so they're trying to make it 4 out of 5. So they have a lot of history and success out here in Region 1. And again, I look at this matchup and I go, the way Whitesboro is throwing the football. If you're Bushland, you have to stop that. And a lot of these are, these are big passes, 63 yards, 38 yards, 34 yards, 42 yards. We saw that last week, against Pisa or 2 weeks ago. The long passes, were just killers. These are not little, hey, we'll get down, we're going to put together a big drive, and then have like a 5-yard touchdown pass or something, inside the 15-yard line. A lot of these are from distance, and so if Bushland's going to have a chance, they have to slow down this attack. And Whitesboro's defense is playing really well. They played really well against Peaster. They only allowed 1 touchdown because the special teams gave up the other one. So this 2 weeks in a row, they've only given up a touchdown. In this one, they forced 5 turnovers. So Whitesboro, somebody pointed out that Whitesboro could be that sleeper team that makes a really deep run. Obviously, Brock is on the other side, and you'd face them if you made the region final. But if you did that, you'd make history just by getting to a region final, and you'd be in a position to win the region, and you would be the underdog. You'd have nothing to lose. But the first step's going to come against Bushland. And like I said, I think the biggest thing for our local teams, speaking about Van Alstyne, same thing with Whitesboro. You've got to handle, a 3.5, 4-hour bus ride, depending on traffic and how slow the bus is going and that sort of thing. Because it's probably about 3 hours if you do it really fast, and I don't know how fast the bus is going to go. So you're looking anywhere from probably 3.5 to 4 hours to get out there. And if you can handle that, then I think you've got a really good chance. It's interesting to see sort of the transformation over the last couple weeks. I'm gonna actually be previewing this game in the paper because it's so far away, and unfortunately we can't cover it with anybody in person. But it's one of those games that I'm interested to go and talk to Coach Fagan and see just sort of how things have sort of blown up. I know they had that big win against Bowie. Matt Harper didn't play in, but Clay Hermes was the quarterback, and he went nuts throwing the ball all around the place. And I wonder if that's sort of that may have been the first game where they were like, oh, hey, maybe some things that we have been working on or waiting to happen kind of clicked in that game, and since then it's been pretty good in terms of the passing game. So Whitesboro versus Bushland, that's 7 o'clock Friday at Childress. God bless you if you go into that. You're probably going to get home at like 3 o'clock in the morning, if not later. And I respect you if you end up going to that game for sure. And it could end up being a really good game between two teams that are somewhat familiar with each other from their game 2 years ago. Also in 3A Division 1, we head over to Region 2. for that area round matchup where we will have Pottsboro taking on Malakoff, and this is a rematch of a rematch of a rematch because these teams have met the last 4 years in the playoffs, including last year when Malakoff won 52-0 in this same area round, which was of course a revenge game for Pottsboro beating Malakoff in 2019 on the way to finishing as the state runner-up. That one was a little deeper in the bracket, but still it was a revenge game all the way there, and it was not close in the second round. Pottsboro's first round game though was extremely close, and it took everything that they could to advance to the area round as they won 56-55 in overtime against Tatum in a crazy game where it took a missed extra point by Tatum after Pottsboro had scored on its initial drive in overtime to advance. I saw the box score, I saw the score, and I assumed that Tatum went for 2 in the win. And talking to Coach Poe, and he said, nope, they just lined up to kick the extra point, and he just missed it. They didn't block it. It just missed. And so a real nice bounce back for Pottsboro. I know there were a lot of people who wondered after they lost the way they did to end the regular season. Again, it didn't mean anything, but they lost 49-20 against Winsboro. And so some people were like, well, you lost to Mount Vernon, and then you lost to Winsboro, so, you started 0-2, then you won 5 straight, then you lost the last 2. What's with this Pottsboro team? And again, they were able to find a way to pull this game out, win this shootout in overtime, in a crazy back and forth kind of game. We talked about Tatum coming in, before they had lost their last game of the regular season. They were I think they were 8th in the rankings in the top 10. And then they lost, so they dropped out. And then so you look at Tatum, they finish at 8-3. All 3 of their losses were by a single point. And I think there were a lot of people that thought that Pottsboro was not going to win this game because they were facing a team in Tatum that was not. They weren't supposed to even be Pottsboro's opponent. They got, since they lost to Sabine, they actually dropped down to a seed that I think people were not expecting, and so they said, oh well, that means that's trouble for Pottsboro, and it almost was, but Pottsboro, like I said, they bounced back. They made the plays when they had to. They forced the 2 turnovers that they forced ended up turning into touchdowns. One of them was a direct touchdown. Cooper Townsley had an interception return, 28 yards for a score, but there was also a fumble recovery, and that ended up leading to a touchdown drive in this one. And again, it was very back and forth, very close. Pottsboro actually had, I guess it would be a 49-35 lead going to the fourth quarter, and give Tatum credit. They scored twice in the fourth quarter to tie it. The last one with 1:19 left to force the overtime. And then in the overtime, Halen Flanagan had the touchdown run, a 1-yarder for Pottsboro. And then again, Tatum was able to score. They just missed the extra point, and that was the game right there. The leaders for Pottsboro in this one, Jet Carroll had 14 carries for 165 yards and a touchdown run. He was also 9 of 14 passing for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. Major McBride had 25 carries for 100 yards. He also had a 75-yard touchdown catch for his lone catch to go with 2 touchdown runs. Jake Kubik had 5 catches for 166 yards and had the other 2 touchdown throws. One of those was from Flanagan, who came on late. Carroll got hurt. I don't know the severity as I do this podcast. So that would be an issue if you're trying to beat a really good opponent. Flanagan has played. They've shared time at points during this year, so this is not a situation where a guy's coming in, cold, and he's shown that obviously he can make some plays when he's been given the opportunity, including in this one, was able to find he had a long pass to Kubik late in the third to give them that 42-35 lead, and then of course he had the touchdown in overtime. So Gonna be interesting. I don't think, obviously Malakoff's gonna come in with a lot of swagger off of last year. They won their opener 59-0, but they do have 3 losses. So if you are, this is not. I don't think this is they're still good. I don't think they're as good as they were last year in terms of they came in with this big bad record. A lot of people were expecting them in Grandview to face off after they came over in the after Grandview came over in realignment. And so they have had some losses. Grandview was one of them. That was only by 3 points. They actually lost their first 3 games. So they've won 8 in a row, but they have had some close games. I mean, they had a game where they only won by a field goal. So there is I don't want to say some hope per se, just because I think last year they had a little bit they were a little bit more intimidating and imposing coming into this matchup as opposed to last year they beat Maypearl as sort of the same road for them. They beat Maypearl 83-7 last year, and they hadn't given, that was the first points they had given up in like 7 games. They had all these shutouts, and it was crazy numbers, and you're like, oh man, this team is ripe and ready to hurt Pottsboro. And Coach Post said it this week. A lot of people didn't expect us to be here in the first place. We're just going to go out and play and see what happens. And if they play like they can, like I said, obviously, injury concerns would probably be the biggest thing to deal with. But worst case scenario is that they're the underdogs, and they're trying to face a team that might be maybe a little too overconfident because of what they did last year. And I have a feeling that maybe not. I don't know for sure, obviously, but I feel like Tatum may have overlooked Pottsboro a little bit just because of what they had done the last couple weeks. And I'm sure Tatum is saying, well, we're 8-2, we should easily be 10-0. Our losses are by a point. Let's go out and take care of this, and they weren't able to. So Pottsboro could, maybe they find a way to make it happen again. The winner of this game gets the West Mineola winner. So obviously, if Pottsboro were to advance, that would be a very good sign for them if Mineola could win, because that's a game that they won, and they won rather handily on their turf. So if you could get a rematch, that might not be the worst thing. Obviously, if you get to the third round, obviously everybody's good. But I think that would we could see a potential district rematch there if Pottsboro is able to get past Malakoff. And this game is 7:00 on Thursday at Sulphur Springs. Again, 7:00 Thursday at Sulphur Springs. Pottsboro against Malakoff. We have 2 games left, and they are both in 3A Division 2. In Region 2, we will talk about the team that left us out of this region and this division. That was the White Red Tigers. They lost against Palmer 32-7. This was a game that was close at halftime. Palmer was up 12-7. White Red scored on a Zyron Daniels 2-yard run to get within the 5 points. But that would be the only touchdown of the game for White Red. I thought going in that they would have to be a low scoring game for White Red to have a chance. They've had moments where they've played well, but obviously a lot of that's been more defensive than offensive. They haven't had a lot of huge breakout games. I didn't think they were gonna win a shootout. So they needed to have some big moments and some key drives and some key stops. And unfortunately, they weren't able to get that as Palmer pulled away in the second half with 3 touchdowns to make it look obviously a lot worse on the scoreboard for the final. But it was that when I saw the halftime score and it's 12-7, I said that's exactly probably where it needs to be. Then White Red goes up 14. If White Red can go up 14-12, kind of keep it around that, and maybe you sort of win that game at the end on like a field goal, or it ends like 27-25, something like that. I thought that was the way that White Red was going to be able to to pull the game out. But unfortunately, they weren't able to do that. I also thought they had a chance because we talked about last week. This district 8-3A Division II swept this district. So Palmer lost to Leonard last year, and I'm sure that was a motivating factor. I'm sure their coaches were like, hey, we lost to the 4 seed last year. We need to make sure that does not happen again. But I thought that was a chance. The other 3 teams in the district advanced. Obviously, a 4 versus a 1 is a tough thing to pull off. It does happen, but Whitewright wasn't able to get that done. But again, a pretty good season for Whitewright in that they missed the playoffs last year. We talked about that. They were not able to play Leonard because of COVID-19 the last week of the season, so they had to forfeit. So who knows? They could have made it last year. We won't, we'll never know because they didn't get to play Leonard. But they were able to get into the playoffs this year. And that's obviously something that was a big goal. Obviously, they would have liked to have won in the playoffs, which is something they haven't done here in the last couple of years, to try to keep building off of that. And we'll see, obviously, that they lose some key pieces on both sides of the ball. Obviously, they'll have a change at quarterback because Caden Caraway is going to graduate. Running back's a spot that they'll have to fill some holes. They do have some interesting talent at the receiver spot. Obviously, Maverick Sartain had a big year, and so he'll be the focus. I guess assuming he doesn't move to quarterback. But so it'll be interesting to see some of the pieces what they have over there. The interesting thing with Whitewright, we've talked about it with some of these other schools. When it comes to realignment, this is another situation where it will be very interesting to see what happens when they release those conference cutoffs, because Whitewright's number was significantly lower. They went from 277 down to 239. That's a drop of 38 students. So they turned in 239, and again, I will go back to the realignment cutoff numbers. The cutoff for 2A, 3A was 229 and 230. If you had 230 or more, you stayed in 3A. So we said Whitewright's at 239. If that number goes up 10 students, which it could, if that goes from 230 to 240, and there are some people that have Whitewright in their projections dropping to 2A, if that number goes up to 240, Whitewright will drop to 2A by 1 student. And so they're eagerly anticipating that number to see where they go, because if they stay, they're probably staying in the district they're in, which is fine. You can compete in that district. But you'd also be literally probably the smallest team in that district, compared to being the biggest school in a 2A district the next 2 years. So Whitewright is one of those teams that is definitely going to be watching, not just for football but all the sports, to see if Whitewright drops below whatever the cutoff number is going to be, and it's going to be really close either way. Either they're going to probably be one of the, if not the smallest, one of the smallest in 3A, or they're going to be just under the line, depending on where that number ends up being. So we could see Whitewright as a 2A Division I football program here in a couple weeks, based on what the numbers show when they come out. So that's the team that's been eliminated. We do have 2 teams that are still playing, and we'll start with the Bells Panthers, who won their bi-district matchup against Blooming Grove 40-12. And this is where most of the scoring came in the first half, as Bells raced out to a 20-0 lead in the first quarter, and then was actually up 33-0 before Blooming Grove got on the board late in the second quarter, going into halftime, and then they scored again in the third quarter, but that was all they could do against Bells. Bells was able to kind of cruise in the second half from there, and they were led by Bo Baker. Big game for him, 8 carries for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also returned the opening kickoff, 70-plus yards, and he caught the lone pass from Blake Rowland for a 26-yard touchdown. Roland added a touchdown run in the fourth quarter, and Bells did what they do. They had 40 plays. They ran it 39 times. They gained over 300 yards. Grady Waldrop had 15 carries for 65 yards. Roland had 6 for 39. And the defense was able to, like we said, outside of 2 drives, play really well and get Bells to the second round. So Bells is 8-3, and we have a rematch again from last year. This is another rematch as they play Eastland, who is 6-5. Eastland won 42-21 against Wichita Falls City View last year. Also in the second round, Eastland won this game 49-22, and they actually, for those who remember, Eastland made it all the way to the region final and ran into Gunner, and Gunner did not treat them very well, especially in the first quarter as they rolled to another region title, and we will talk about the Tigers here in a second. But this is obviously a little bit different Eastland team. They do not have they do have some playmakers still, but it is not the playmaker that they had last year who really hurt them at the quarterback spot. And so I don't know if that changes both sides' approaches because you don't have that guy to do some of the things that he did last year. And this was a team last year, that they were kind of in the same boat they were, they finished 10-4, so they lost their first 3 games, and then they won 10 straight to get to the region final. So I guess they were, let's see, what is that? So they would have been 8-3. So they lost 2 more games than they did last year. So I don't know what that says. Obviously they didn't win the district. They didn't win the district last year. Or no, maybe they did win the district. Or they got the top seed. I think they tied for the first. They tied for first in district. But obviously, they had a guy last year in Baron Morton who just dominated both in passing and rushing. He was a major threat. That bowling ball of a running back, Brandon Fielding, he's gone. So there are some new guys to deal with. The guy at quarterback, Keaton Hicks, he leads them in passing and receiving. So they still do a lot with the quarterback in terms of running the ball. But I don't think they're as explosive as they were last year. But it's gonna be interesting to see how I think each side attacks this matchup because last year wasn't all that close. 49-22 was the final score. The winner of this plays the Holiday Leonard winner. So there's a chance that there would be a rematch for Bells if Leonard were to win. That's going to be a really tough game. Holiday's a state ranked team to end the regular season. So I don't know how well things might go for the Tigers, but if they could pull that off, that would be an awesome rematch. Obviously, a huge upset for them. Holiday hasn't lost, and of course, for those who remember, as Bells fans listening to this, you have played both of those teams, and the game against Holiday was a 27-14 win by Holiday over Bells. That's one of their I think that is their closest game. I'm rolling through their scores. No, okay. So they played Iowa Park and lost and won by 6. So, but the 13 points, the 13-point margin against Bells for Holiday was their second closest game. And that's their second lowest point total. They won against Iowa Park 20-14. Every other game. Oh no, they scored 20. They won 26-6 against Callisburg. But every other game since then, obviously they put up huge numbers. So either way, if Bells advances, there's going to be a rematch. One from non-district and one from district. And so it'll be interesting to see if Bells is able to do that. If they are able to do that, they'll be in the region semifinals. for the third time in school history and the second time in the past 3 years. Obviously, last year, Eastland kept them from doing that. This is also a little bit of an interesting note. It would be the third straight year, if they do get a win, that Bells has won at least 9 games. And Bells has never done that before. They've had back-to-back years with at least 9 wins. Obviously, the previous 2 years being that. But they have a chance to do that 3 years in a row, and that's something that's never been done. So that's an interesting little tidbit I was looking at. And again, this game, so it's 3A Division II, Region 2 area round, Bells Eastland. This is on Friday at 7 o'clock at Boyd. This is a game I will be at. I did the game last year, so maybe I'm a jinx if things don't go well for Bells. But with the other games super far away, this is the game that I'll be doing on Friday. I will be at the Pottsboro game on Thursday, for those who care about such things, after I go watch Gunner volleyball in the morning or mid-morning at 11 o'clock. I'll end up going over to Sulphur Springs to watch Pottsboro, and then I'll cover Bells on Friday, and then if the Gunner girls win their volleyball match against Lorena, they play on Saturday at 11. So could be another fun-filled week with a lot of big things happening the end of the week there. And speaking of Gunner, and I did say that was 7 p.m. Friday at Boyd, and that's regular Boyd, not McKinney Boyd. So don't go to McKinney Boyd thinking you're going to see them. Go to regular Boyd, home of the Yellow Jackets. And that's where you'll find Bells Eastland at 7 p.m. on Friday. And that's where they played last year. So obviously, either Eastland's coach is superstitious or Coach West is not superstitious and said, it doesn't matter where we play, we'll go back to Boyd, even though we lost to you there last year. So that's where that game's going to be. And we mentioned Gunner. I will bring up Gunner as our last matchup. And they are going to take on Millsap. This is a game that is also a Thursday game, so we have 2 Thursday games this week, 2 Thursday, 3 Friday, and this is going to be in Grapevine at Mustang Panther Stadium, 7 p.m. on Thursday, and this is 11-0 Gunner against 6-5 Millsap. Gunner won last week 62-7 against Scurry Rosser, and Millsap won 36-32 against Henrietta. Fun little shootout there. I think they actually won in the last couple minutes to get that victory. To highlight another dominating Gunner win. Again, they were up 49-0 at halftime. They were up 62-0 after 3 quarters. Scurry Rosser got on the board in the 4th quarter to avoid the shutout. So that's another single digit. I think that's 7 out of 11 games for Gunner. They've allowed single digits or less. They haven't allowed more than 15 points in a game. And they came, again, so close to getting a shutout again. But in typical Gunner fashion, always spreading around the touchdowns, even when you score as many as they did. Hudson Graham, 7 of 10 passing, 199 yards. He had a touchdown pass to Cole Lemons. He had a touchdown pass to Cannon Lemberg. And he had one to Ethan Sloan. So 3 touchdowns and 7 passes, pretty stinking good. Cannon Lemberg had 2 catches for 89 yards. Ethan Sloan 3 for 56, and Lemons 2 for 54. Rushing, Graham actually led the way too as well. He had 6 for 87, and he also had a touchdown run. Sloan had 2 touchdown runs, but he only finished with 6 carries for 32 yards, and his day was done rather early. Ivy Hellman added a touchdown run. He had 5 carries for 46 yards. Lemberg also returned an interception for a score, and Hayden Kennemer rounded out the scoring with a touchdown run as well, and I think that hit all of it. I mean, it's what Gunner does. This is actually, I looked this up too. I knew it wasn't an individual game record, but so in the last 6 playoff games for Gunner, dating back to last year, they've scored at least 60 points 3 times in that 6-game stretch. We could see that again this week. I think Millsap's probably better than Scurry Rosser. However, this is a team obviously that's has already achieved so much for them. The win last week was only the 2nd playoff win in school history. and it was their first since 1999. So we're talking about we're going back to these kids weren't even alive back then. So it's one of those deals where I think it's a mismatch on paper. It may be a mismatch on the field. But obviously Millsap's they're coming off a crazy win just to get here. And I don't see this being a real threat. The winner of this plays Palmer, the Palmer Dublin winner. I think if it's Gunner, I mean it's easy to project with them. I don't think they're going to be tested until the region final. And if that is the case, I think whether it's Holiday or I don't know if I don't want to put East in that category. But I feel like if Holiday, Bells, or Leonard advances, obviously Gunner has wins over 2 of the 3. So, I mean, I would think Holiday's probably the favorite to come out of that district. But again, that's a program that Gunner has beaten multiple times in this recent, now 6-year run. So, I don't think it's. I mean, I thought Eastman was going to give Gunner a decent game last year, and Gunner just blitzed him from the start. So, I don't think this side of the bracket is very strong in terms of giving Gunner much resistance. But you never know. That's why we play the games. So we will see what happens with Gunner. I will point out too. Last week was Coach Jake Fizel's 175th win. He is now 175-28. If you can't guess, that's really good. And I didn't total up. The last X number of years because it's something really stupid, and they're obviously going to add to that. So whenever their season ends, which is probably not going to be for another couple weeks for sure, I might dig that out just to kind of say, hey, in the last since this run started in 2016, here's Gunner's overall record and how crazy it is. So, but that's a nice little milestone for Coach Fizel. So, depending on how they finish this year, he's probably looking at getting career win 200. I guess sometime in 2023, because the max they could win next year would still come up short. Even if they won out this year, he'd still come up a little bit short. So, Gunner versus Millsap. That's Thursday at 7:00 at Grapevine Mustang Panther Stadium, and I think we may see a little bit of the same from the Tigers that we saw last week in their win over Scurry Rosser. And of course, we do have one more team to talk about. They do not have a game this week, but down in 2A Division 1 Region 2, the Tioga Bulldogs were eliminated from the playoffs. They came up short against Celeste, 56-33, in their by-district game. That was a game that I went to last Thursday. I thought it would be a pretty good game. It was a little bit shootout-ish. Tioga actually got off to a 10-0 start after the first quarter, and I was like, oh, hey, here we go. They recovered a pooch kick that bounced that got away, and they fell on that, turned that into a touchdown. They were able to get, make some other plays defensively. They were able to get a field goal, and they're up 10-0. Things are going well, and then Celeste came up with some big plays to take a 28-17, and even then it's 28-17 at halftime. You feel pretty decent about that, all things considered. But then third quarter, Celeste came out and scored 3 touchdowns, and to kind of really put that game away. Logan Westbrook finished his career 27 carries for 208 yards and a touchdown. Johnny Dorpinghouse finished off a really good freshman year for him. 23 carries, 129 yards, and a touchdown. And I mentioned the field goal was by Alex Catarino. And so Tioga finishes the year at 5-6. And that's about as as a good a first year for a program that was coming off one win last year, and didn't make the playoffs. Didn't win a district game. You talk about the job that Coach Chad Rogers and that staff did going over there, and just the automatic improvement that they were able to make. When you talk about, when you go from 1-8 and you get 5 wins in the regular season that matched your total from the previous 3 seasons. You go into the final game of district. If you win, you get a share of the district title, and the year before you didn't win a district game. Last year, their offense was not good, averaged 9 points a game. They scored at least 21 points in every game this year, except for one. So you saw the tangible improvement, and there's a lot of guys back. Obviously, they do have some seniors at some key spots on defense. Obviously, quarterback's going to be new because Westbrook graduates. But for the most part, you looked at what they were putting out there towards the end, and you had Dorpinghouse is a guy who is a freshman. Made some big plays, whether it's in the return game, receiving and rushing. At the end there, they were playing some freshmen at receiver. Chase Evans was a guy who got hurt. He'll be back for his senior year. He's just a junior, so there's a lot. I think Coach Rogers said they lose 7 seniors. I think, and which is not a huge number. I think they're going to bring back. They're bringing back. I think he said at least 7 and 7 on offense and defense. So the interesting thing with them is going to be, of course, realignment. It is the hot topic with everybody once their season ends. Collinsville is going to be leaving their district. They turned in a number that was lower than the last cutoff. Lindsay did the same thing. So Lindsay and Collinsville are probably going to leave the district. And then the question becomes, what do you do with those other teams? It was not a very big district to begin with. Where you're talking about a district that, it wasn't real big in the first place, and then when they added in Lindsay and Alvord, that made it where before that you only had to win 1 game to make the playoffs. As long as you beat the team that was in the that was the last place team, you were guaranteed to make the playoffs just by winning 1 game. And then obviously that changed in this last realignment. You had to win at least 2 games, and then as we talked about with Collinsville, you had to win the right 2 games. They did not do that, and they got left out. So you have a 6-team district that is losing 2 teams for sure in Collinsville and Lindsay. The question, of course, White Wright could maybe fit in that district. Obviously, if Tom Bean's in that district, White Wright's right next door. But that would make it a 5-team district. Is that enough? Would they try to add somebody in there? But I think, I would imagine, depending on what Alvord loses, if they're not the favorite, I would assume Tioga is probably the favorite. Their only 2 losses were to the 2 teams in front of them, and one of them is going to be leaving. And if Alvord has a lot of loss to graduation, then I think the baseline obviously for Tioga has been set. You have make the playoffs, and I think winning record. You finish 5-5 in the regular season, 5-6 after the playoff loss. I think bare minimum we're talking make the playoffs, have a winning record. If depending on where you finish in the district standings, can we get past the first round? But I think they have a chance to be in the mix for all those things, just based on the people that they have coming back, and just that huge jump that they made from last year to this year. I'm assuming, obviously, a huge jump from where they are now is 9-1, make the third round. That might be a little too big to chew right off the bat, but like I said, those other goals are relatively achievable for a group that got a taste of some really good success this year, and I know that they're looking forward to getting back out there, make that happen again next year as well. So that's a look back at the Bi-District round, a look ahead to the area round. We got 5 teams left. Let's hope we get a couple advance. I think we got a good chance on 3 or 4 of them to get to the third round, and then we're talking about playing around Thanksgiving. It's always a goal. So hopefully we have some teams that will be doing that after Turkey Day next week. Again, if you're going to some of these games, please be safe. Have a good time, but be careful because of the distance. Unfortunately, there haven't been really a lot of close games. Everything's looking, it's like an hour and a half away minimum on a lot of these games. So be careful. Enjoy the games. Hope your team wins. We will see what happens as we get ready for the third round of the playoffs next week. We'll see who gets there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.